Welcome to the Horror Next Door. This is all the horror movies we watched in June 2022. Links to our Letterboxd accounts are in the description box below. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. Alligator 2, The Mutation from 1991, which we watched on Shudder. In a previous What We Watched video, we talked about the original Alligator, which I like much more than this one. And I talked about how I think I'd never seen Alligator 2. And after watching this one, I think I haven't ever seen Alligator 2. And if I have, I just completely forgot everything about it. But it's definitely not as good as the first one. It does have some random people in it that, you know, we recognize, like Dee Wallace and Steve Railsback. And then there's like a random character played by Kane Hodder who dies. But it's just not as good as the first one. It's missing Robert Forster's awesomeness. And I don't know, there's just something about it. The charm of the first one's just not there. But I would recommend it. It's fun. Check it out.
I agree. I guess they took a couple of little notes from the first movie and incorporated them into this, but it really is its own separate thing, and it could basically just be another Alligator movie. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a sequel to the other film. It just doesn't come across the same way. Somehow the original Alligator managed not to feel cheesy and corny and everything, and I feel like this was verging in that territory sometimes, so it was definitely a different experience, but that did make it fun to watch, so I could recommend it, just not very highly. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, which we watched on Shudder with Joe Bob. This was a very interesting and odd movie. I own the book, which I never finished reading. And I had just always heard a lot about it because I think it was Jodie Foster's first role. I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely one of them, if not the first. And she definitely carries the film. She is the little girl who lives down the lane, and the movie completely centers around her at all times. Considering that, I think she did a great job acting-wise, and it's a little bit hard for me to straight up say that I liked this movie because there are a lot of really just uncomfortable types of things going on, mostly with Martin Sheen's character. But it always kept me interested. I never really knew what was going to happen. I guess even in moments where I felt a little bit uncomfortable, I could still appreciate all the effort that was being put into this from the cast and whatnot. So I would recommend it. Keep in mind that it is from the 70s and that it is a little bit of a slower pace. There's definitely not, blood and gore and things like that. So if that's not your type of horror, you may not be super into it.
Yeah, even though this movie is slow and not a lot happens, it was, interesting. I don't know if it was just because Joe Bob kept coming in every once in a while and giving you, his little facts about the movie and things like that, if that helped break things up. I don't know if just watching the movie straight through, if I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much, but definitely with Joe Bob, I enjoyed it more. But this movie is definitely weird. I feel like it's something that if released today would get a lot of bad flack.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that being said though, I would recommend it, but probably with Joe Bob. Flatliners from 2017, which I unfortunately rented on Netflix on disc. This is one of those movies that when it came out at the time, I added it to my Netflix queue, and it's just been sitting on my queue since 2017 and eventually worked its way up, and now here we are in 2022. I finally received it, and I probably should have removed it a long time ago because it was not a good movie. Now, I will admit I have yet to see the original Flatliners, which I need to watch that so I can get the taste of this one out of my mouth, because Hellcat tells me that it's a good film. This movie, on the other hand, I don't know. I don't even know what to say.
It was just that memorable, right?
Yeah. No. I do not recommend this one. Maybe in the next What We Watch, we'll have the original one watched, and I will recommend that one. But this one, I do not recommend.
Yes, I certainly do not recommend this movie at all. If you want to watch Flatliners, just watch the original. I'm not saying the original is a masterpiece. It's a good film, not a great film, but it's much more fun. It was better acted because of the year it came out. The elements of things going on when they were dead or whatnot, or, seeing things when they were awake and things like that. It's everything about it is just better. I don't even know why they remade it, because again, it's a good film, not a great film. It's almost like, oh, well, we can improve this, and then they just made it 1,000 times worse. I don't know why anyone would want to see this, from the acting to the pacing to the effects, the writing, the dialogue, just everything. It is a mess. Please don't watch it. Dead Men Walking from 2005, which I rented on Netflix disc. I just thought the premise of a viral outbreak with zombies inside of a prison sounded cool. When we first put the movie in, Psycho automatically was like, oh gosh, it's an asylum movie, it's gonna be garbage. I actually had quite a bit of fun with this movie. It did definitely feel like something that would be in one of our crappy horror movie packs, and heck, maybe it is, and I didn't even realize I already had it, but I think there was a weight on the disc, so I moved it up to the top. Like Psycho was talking about, it's one of those things where something is there for so long and you just need to get it out. But yeah, I think the gore especially and the practical effects were really awesome. You can tell that this was low budget. Even just watching the movie, I felt like I could see that they were having fun making it. And then there was a bonus feature that we watched behind the scenes and some of the making and stuff, and it really did seem like they were having fun when they were making it. So I think it's kind of difficult not to enjoy a movie where you can tell that they were really, actually trying and that they had a good time. And especially because we've seen so much worse than this, I definitely do recommend it. Just know that you're not getting, big epic Walking Dead, Greg Nicotero like effects, and the acting's so-so and things of that nature. But it was a pretty good time.
I would have to agree with everything that Hellcat said, but I also like to mention that the soundtrack was a lot of rock songs, and at the end it turns out that all the songs were by the same band, a band I've never heard of. The band's name is Substance D, which I've actually gone now and looked them up and listened to a couple of their songs. They're actually not that bad, but this movie's not the greatest horror movie ever made, obviously, but it's got some fun stuff in it, it's got some cool gore, and the soundtrack's pretty cool, so I would recommend it. Slaughterhouse from 1987, which we watched on Shudder with Joe Bob. This is one of those 80s slasher movies that I've never seen before, and now, with Joe Bob, I'm being exposed to it. But this one's not good. I'm sorry. If there's some huge Slaughterhouse fans out there, I apologize, but this is no Friday the 13th or Halloween or anything of that kind. To me, there's really not much that's redeemable in this movie. I do not recommend it.
Oi, yeah, I definitely have my issues with this movie, not the least of which was at the very beginning of the last drive-in episode when Joe Bob said that it was footage of a real slaughterhouse. I actually made it a point to fast forward through all the credits just to make sure we didn't have to suffer through any of that crap. I think the only thing I can say about this is that Buddy was actually quite likable. In a way, I felt sorry for him. I felt like he was just being used. It sort of reminded me of how the family kind of molds and manipulates Leatherface in some of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies to do what they want him to do, So in that way, there was one sympathetic character and he's, chilling, cuddling with pigs and stuff. And I'm like, aw. But everything else about this was bad. I guess there were a couple of sort of cool kills, but the storyline and everything else is just so crappy that nothing can really save it, in my opinion. Definitely don't recommend. Yellow Brick Road from 2010, which Psycho rented from Netflix, not knowing that I had already seen it. I remember seeking this out a few years ago because I saw it on someone's list of all the best found footage movies. I remembered the basic premise, but not a lot of details about it. Even though I could recommend this, and I think it's a good movie overall, it's not all that memorable. I don't think that by choice I would have gone out of my way to watch it a second time. I think maybe the idea of what they were going to do with this is a little bit better than the actual execution, but it does have its moments, and I think as a found footage movie, it does its job. So yeah, I would recommend it, just not run out and see it type thing. Maybe especially if you're just a fan of found footage and you haven't seen this one yet, check it out.
This is another movie that's been on my Netflix queue for ages. I feel like this movie has a really cool setup. with the backstory and the thing that, took place, and now they're trying to, discover the secret and what happened to these people and all this stuff. I thought that was really well done and, really got you into the backstory of what this is all about. So the setup and everything to them getting out in the middle of nowhere and just some of the things that happen as they're just traveling. It's just, odd things. I liked all that stuff. I thought this was really well done for a low budget film. I feel like maybe it does take a little long for the group of people to finally get to a point where, things really start hitting the fan. But other than that, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was pretty good, and I recommend it. Hellbender from 2021, which we watched on Shudder with Joe Bob. This movie is weird. I feel like this is one of those movies where, like, if somebody said, hey, what happens in that movie? It'd be kind of hard for me to explain it, but I just know it's about witches and a bunch of weird shit happens. It was weird, but it was kind of cool at the same time. And I had a lot of fun, especially watching it with Joe Bob. For it being as low budget as it is and the small crew that they had, the special effects were actually pretty good. I would recommend this one. Check it out.
I do still remember when we originally watched the trailer for this. I don't think we spoke about it in an actual trailer video, but I remember saying we should definitely watch that. So it was pretty cool to see it pop up on the last drive-in. Zelda, Lulu, and John Adams were all on the Joe Bob episode that we watched, and they are some very interesting people. Listening to them talk was wild. They have these crazy stories. They have this outlook on life that is really just unlike the majority of the population. They all just seem like true artists, and the fact that they're making films as a family is so cool. I totally want to try to seek out some of their other movies that they've made before this one. This movie definitely is pretty batshit crazy. You never know what's going to happen or what you're going to get, but it's a fun ride, and you definitely haven't seen anything quite like it, so I do recommend it. Triangle from 2009, which we watched on Shudder. I've seen it on a lot of different streaming services though, so if you haven't seen it, I do highly recommend it. You should probably be able to find it pretty easily. I remember really liking this movie when I originally saw it. It is a time loop type thing. You're experiencing events repeating over and over again, and in the wrong hands, that can become very tedious and boring, but I thought this did an amazing job of using that idea. There are a couple of different twists and turns that I just don't think the majority of people would see coming. I think they're really well executed, very thought through. When you're writing a story where you're playing with time, it's very easy to make mistakes and have errors and continuity problems, but I think that this was very well thought through. I'm very glad that I watched it again. It's something that I would watch again and again because there's little things that you might miss the first time or two, and I just think it's a great movie, so I definitely highly recommend it, like I said.
So I've always had a thing for stories that have time loops or just things to do with time manipulation in some way. So when this thing started doing the loops, it really kind of drew me in, sucked me in more. Hellcat has been trying to get me to watch this movie for years, and for whatever reason, we just never sat down and watched it. And one night we just said, screw it, let's put it on. I was pretty blown away. I don't really give high ratings that often. I feel like 3.5 is probably like the highest ratings I give out on average. But this one I gave 4.5. I thought it was really awesome. Also, being a weirdo and liking masks, I think the bag mask thing that is worn in this movie looks pretty cool, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of Jason from Part 2 or even like The Strangers, but not. But it looks cool. I love it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for this movie being what it is, I think the filmmakers and all the actors involved did a really good job of just knocking this one out of the park, in my opinion. I highly recommend you check this one out. Direwolf from 2009, which we watched on a crappy horror movie pack. As you can tell from the title, this is just one of those movies where it's a wolf going around killing people. That's pretty much the whole movie.
And the wolf is clearly just a guy in some kind of not very well-made suit.
Yes, and also all the death scenes are pretty much the dude in the wolf suit attacking someone and them just throwing blood all around. There's not visible wounds of any kind. It's just throw a bunch of blood and pretend to be chewing on him. Done. So based on everything I just said, you're probably thinking, wow, this movie's dumb. But yeah, it's not a great movie, but it's one of those it's so bad it's good kind of deals. And we actually started having a lot of fun with this movie. Just the characters and some of the things that people are doing in this movie or saying. It's like, really? It was unintentionally hilarious, and we had a blast watching this movie. I would recommend it on that note.
Yes, there is a whole genetic modification scientific aspect to this movie. It's basically just an excuse to make some kind of a version of a werewolf movie, you know, and there are some really hilarious moments of dialogue and interactions between the characters as a result of their attempt to involve science and everything. There's also like military involvement, and some of the conversations between the police force that are working on dealing with this dire wolf and the military are just so classic. I mean, this is, yeah, again, it's not a good movie by any means, but it was definitely fun to watch. I have to recommend it for that exact reason. The Roommate from 2011, which we watched on Tubi. This was a movie that it said was about to expire, and I'm pretty sure we just added it thinking, wow, this looks ridiculous and corny. We should watch that one day. So I just put it on randomly one day thinking I had never seen it, and Psycho goes and looks it up on Letterboxd, and he said, "You've already rated this." And I was like, what? Because we were a good chunk of the way into the movie and I didn't remember anything. So that just goes to say everything about this movie. It is completely forgettable. What I really have to get on it for is 100% just ripping off Single White Female. I don't even understand how the people that made this film got away with copying exact plot points and story, just everything from Single White Female. It's confusing to me. I think that there could have been some legal action taken or something, because this is straight up plagiarism. If you've seen Single White Female and then you go watch this, I think this is actually one of the only things that made this movie enjoyable for me, is comparing it to Single White Female and being completely flabbergasted by how much this just rips it off. Sure, they changed a couple elements. The women are younger. It's a cat instead of a dog. You know, really small things like that. But facts are facts. And this movie is really stupid. It's just a watered down, lamer version of Single White Female. So you should just go watch Single White Female instead. Do not recommend it.
This movie is not good, but it's kind of fun to watch just to see how not good it is. And just to see how much they rip off Single White Female. I don't even know what else to say. I do not recommend it unless you just want to watch schlock.
Some pointless garbage to pass the time.
Yeah, if you're, it's been a long day and you want to watch something that's just, you can turn your brain off and not have to think about things.
Yes, pretty people in pointless garbage. That's what this is.
Hot garbage. Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker from 1981, which we watched on Shudder with Joe Bob. When I was compiling the extensive 80s horror movie list that I made for the channel, this was one of the movies that kind of stuck out to me that I had never seen, and I had seen a lot of good reviews about it, and I said, I need to make a point to see that movie. Here it is on the last drive-in with Joe Bob, so even better. Was super excited to see this finally, and I must say, I was kind of disappointed. Just talking about it here before recording this, Hellcat apparently remembers way more that happens in this movie than I do. I must have checked out of this movie halfway through and was just pretty much just watching it for Joe Bob at that point. I really just couldn't get into this movie. I don't know. It was kind of average, or maybe just below average for me. So I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, I guess we're ending this on a little bit of a sour note, but clearly June was a little bit of a rough month for us here as far as our horror film watching adventures have gone. But I may remember more of this film than Psycho does, but I rated it lower than he did. I don't get it at all. I just feel like there wasn't much substance to the story at all. I think that it was pretty unbelievable. I can't imagine that there's absolutely no one in this boy's life that would realize something is wrong with this aunt, and that, all of a sudden he's really sick and he can't go anywhere. Like, there's a neighbor that tries to butt in, and the boy is seeing a girl and she kind of gets involved, but it just all feels very convoluted and unrewarding, and there's some very awkward stuff. Some of the things that detective says were really harsh, even for an 80s horror. There's a lot of stuff that we watch from back in the day that we see now, and we're like, wow, that would not fly, that would get so much flack. This detective guy is especially wild. Anyway, overall, I would probably say this really weird poster art is probably my favorite part of the whole thing. Unfortunately, cannot recommend it. As always, we thank you so much for watching. Leave us a comment if you have any horror movie recommendations, and we will add them to our watch list. Until next time!